Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Finance, Ways and Means Committee together for March 8th, 2022. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Campbell, Camper, Crawford, Faison, Freeman, Gant, Garrett, Gillespie, Hawk, Hicks, Lambert, Lynn, Miller, Ogles, Sexton, Shaw, Sparks, Todd, Whitson, Williams, Wendell, Zachary, Vice Chairman Baum, Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Here.
Madam Chair Lady, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before we get underway, do we have any personal orders or announcements from members of the committee? Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. I have a special guest with me here today. She's been my shadow since early this morning, walking around and learning about how the legislation works. Her name is, just left me. Like just gone.
Senior moment.
Marty Green, and she's from Rutherford County. So please make her feel welcome.
Thank you for being with us, Ms. Green. Are there other announcements? Seeing none, we do have 10 bills on our calendar today, and that will be followed by budget hearings. So we are going to first take up our calendar. Item number 1 is House Bill 1638 by Chairman Todd. We have a motion and a second. Chairman Todd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And
I believe there's an amendment on this bill.
Yes, ma'am, there is.
Drafting code 014647, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Is there a motion on the amendment? I have a motion and a second on the amendment. Chairman Todd, does the amendment make the bill?
It does.
So why don't we get the bill in its proper order, and then we'll let you describe the bill as amended. Do I hear any objections to voting on the amendment? Seeing none, we're voting on attaching drafting code 014647 to House Bill 1638. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The bill is amended. Chairman Todd, please describe your bill as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill I'm bringing on behalf of the Speaker and myself as a member of the Capitol Commission. This legislation is brought to clarify that the legislature is in complete control of the second floor of the Capitol building. And the amendment clarifies that the Department of General Services can still do their normal maintenance and upkeep with certain notice requirements. And that's, I can explain more, but that's primarily what this does.
Are there questions of the sponsor? Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Sponsor, this legislation would basically say, though, that all general service could do the maintenance, but no bus could be removed without or brought in without the legislature's permission. Is that correct?
Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It does not address any specific details about fixtures or anything like that, but that is the intent that if there was, let's say, General Services wanted to install microphones in the chamber or in the hallway outside the chamber and monitor what's going on or something like that, it has to be with the permission of both speakers.
Representative Ogles, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the sponsor. So, for instance, with this piece of legislation, if the members of the General Assembly wanted to actually finish the Capitol and install those missing lighting elements that were not shipped to us because of the Civil War, would we have the ability to do that independently, or would it require permission from another branch of government?
Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would imagine, since that's on the second floor, if that's the area you're talking about, that would be with the permission of both speakers and no one else.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, sponsor.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Just a hypothetical question. If the General Assembly under this bill was in control of the second floor, meaning that they could invite or have any statues or busts on that floor, they could either take them away or bring them back in. Could they do that?
Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This just clarifies that no one else is allowed to do that. No other entity, if we had a department that wanted to do that without our permission, that they would not be allowed to do that.
Representative Miller?
Thank you. Could the General Assembly vote to place on the second floor the bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest?
Chairman Todd?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess, the General Assembly has a lot of authority and a lot of power. I think we can do that today. I don't think that changes anything over what we have today, but this puts some additional clarifications in for the specifics of what others cannot do more than it does what we can do.
Representative Shaw?
Thank
Oh,
you, Madam Chair. One other question I forgot to
I'm
ask.
sorry, Representative Shaw. Representative Miller had a follow-up question. I
sorry.
didn't realize he wanted to
Thank,
continue.
thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Would you and maybe the Speaker be open to a friendly amendment to prohibit the General Assembly from being able, since they would have control of the second floor, from being able to have any legislation introduced to bring back the bust of a Nathan Bedford Forrest to the second floor? Would you be open to that?
Chairman Todd?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I understand it, we are not allowed to bind the hands of the future General Assemblies by any actions that we take here in this General Assembly.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Representative Shaw?
Thank you. My final question, and thank you for letting me ask this one. What about people who come, not that I'm so much always in favor, but people who come protest and things like that? How would it affect those groups?
Chairman Todd?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know that it's going to affect groups that enter in. I think we would still have the ability to make rules about decorum and maybe volume related to the fire marshal issues. But other than that, I don't know that there's certainly no intention here of limiting public's access to the building or even the second floor. So that's not the intention of this legislation.
Representative Freeman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know I'm out of order, but I just had a good friend walk in the room, one of Sam Whitson's constituents, but a buddy I went to high school with, Lamont Turner. I wanted to recognize him.
We're very happy to know that Representative Freeman has friends who are willing to come down here and watch him in action. I said who are willing to take the time to come down here and watch you in action. Is there additional discussion on on Chairman Todd's bill? And Chairman Todd, just from my understanding, I believe the intention of this bill is to make sure that the General Assembly, the speakers of the General Assembly, would have control over maintenance, anything that would be scheduled to work that would be done on the second floor, so that we wouldn't have, for instance, someone trying to do major repair work as we're trying to be in session and so forth. And to me, that is the major function of this bill. Is that correct?
I don't know, I would summarize to say it's a major function, but it's certainly a part of that. We've got to make sure that we can operate in our normal business and without any possible interruptions. And so I think that's certainly part of it. But I think also part of it is installing fixtures and things that, for example, there are a series of cameras right outside the House chambers right now. We don't know where they came from. We don't know who put them up. And they're not outside the Senate chambers. So it's kind of odd. That's just something I've noticed here lately. And so it's things like that that we want to make sure, again, because it is already in statute that the General Assembly is in control of the second floor, and this just gives further clarification to that.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, without objection, we are voting on House Bill 1638. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 1638 moves on to calendar and rules. Can't turn the page. Item number 2 on our calendar is House Bill 1713 by Speaker Pro Tem Marsh, who's been waiting patiently. We have a motion and a second. Speaker Marsh, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This bill is from the Comptroller's Office, and this bill makes government work better by allowing the Utility Management Review Board, the UMRL, to initiate either a consolidation or a merger among utility districts that benefit the ratepayers of a financially distressed district. Before the UMRB can finalize the merger, number one, a feasibility study must be completed that recommends the merger. Number two, a public hearing shall be conducted in the financial distressed district. And number three, the UMRB must make a determination that the merger is in the best interest of the ratepayers. Furthermore, this bill clarifies that the Utility District Revitalization Fund can be used to mitigate short-term financial impacts from a board-initiated consolidation of merger. I'll answer any questions.
Thank you. You've heard the sponsor's explanation. Are there questions of the sponsor on the bill? Seeing none, without objection, we're voting on House Bill 1713. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 1713 moves on to calendar and rules.
Thank you, Madam
you,
Chairman.
Speaker Marsh. Item number 3 on our calendars, House Bill 2044 by Deputy Speaker Johnson. Deputy Speaker, you are recognized. We have a motion and a second. Please describe your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 2044 increases the length of time that temporary license plates are valid for a motor vehicle from 30 days to 60 days and increases the fee from $5.50 to $6.50.
You've heard the sponsor's explanation. Are there questions? Seeing none, without objection, we are voting on House Bill 2044. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 2044 moves on to calendar and rules. Thank you, Deputy
Thank you,
Speaker
Madam
Johnson.
Chair, Committee.
Item number 4 on our calendar, House Bill 1449 by Chairman Curcio. We have a motion and a second. Mr. Chairman, sir, please tell us about your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee. And this is amendment coded 11968, but I think it's already on the bill.
It's traveling with it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Starting September 1st, 2020, we revised our drug-free zone laws in this state to make them more exact and modernize them. You all voted in wide majority to do that. What this bill does is this deals with folks that were incarcerated under the old law. So under the old mandatory minimum, it would allow them to petition the court. You'd have a hearing between with the DA and the judge present to analyze the facts of the case and see if they would have been sentenced differently under the new law. But there's several safeguards in here to make sure that we're only helping those who truly were sort of wrong place, wrong time. Number one, they can look at any of the other charges that were brought, but were not included in the conviction. That helps with gang-related violence and that sort of thing. We can talk about it if you have questions. They can also take into account the offender's behavior while they've been incarcerated. And they also would not be eligible if this would not reduce their time at all. So, for example, if they got another sentence, for life or for some longer sentence, we're not going to clog up the docket with somebody who's not even going to be helped by this. So this is truly just to get at folks who were at the wrong place at the wrong time. We've got cases across the states where even the judges have said to us, look, I would have never given this person 18 years or 15 years or what have you, but they were on the side of the street. They got them inside the zone. If they've been on the other side of the street, they'd have maybe served 11 months to 29 days or something like that. So that's the point of this bill, and I would seek passage.
You've heard Chairman Curcio's explanation. Are there questions? Question has been called. Without objection, we're voting on House Bill 1449. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Chairman Curcio, you move forward to calendar and rules.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee. Beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Next on our agenda is item number 5, House Bill 1872 by Chairman Halsey. We have a motion and a second. Chairman Halsey, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair Lady and Committee. In 2011, this body enacted what was called the Retail Tourism Development District Act. And it was for cities that border neighboring states. And it was a bill that was used to try and stimulate ideas to bring in tourism and develop businesses in those areas to compete with people across the state line. Bristol took advantage of it. Eastridge took advantage of it, and it was Kingsport would have fit in that too. Bristol did quite well, and Eastridge did too. Kingsport not so well, and so these folks in my city are asking for an extension of this border bill for 5 years. And that's what the bill asks for, and that's what it does.
All right, you've heard Chairman Halsey's explanation. Are there questions about the bill? Question has been called on the bill. Without objection, we are voting on House Bill 1872. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Chairman Halsey, you leave here to go to calendar and rules.
Thank you, Chair
Have a
Lady.
nice trip.
Thank you, Committee.
Item number 6 is House Bill 2196. There's Chairman Kiesling. We have a motion and a second. And Mr. Chairman, I see we have a Finance Subcommittee amendment. Does it make the bill? Do we need to add that first, or what's I believe we need to.
Yes, my apology. The drafting code, Chair Lady, is 14371. I hope that corresponds.
It does. So do I have a motion on drafting code 014371? We have a motion and a second. Without objection, we're voting on amendment 014371. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment is attached. Chairman Kiesling, if you would describe the bill as amended.
Certainly. Thank you. Thank you, members, for that. And Chair Lady, the House Bill 2196 deals with quitclaim. And it was actually brought to our attention by both the Register of Deeds Association and Tennessee County Official Association with assistance and working with the Land Title Association as well. The intent of this bill is just to remedy a situation in which one refuses to record a document or pay the transfer tax on a quitclaim warranty deed. There have been instances where people have refused to pay their transfer tax, citing the fact that this is not a mandate, that's not mandated in code. The registers are seeking to change that to further avoid any similar instances from happening again. And I might add that I did in subcommittee, and I'd like to do that too, if you'd allow me. I do want to say kudos to Patrick Smith, who registered down in Cheatham County, attorney as well, and he gave much guidance on this for us. So with that, I just want to be on the record saying that. I will at this time entertain any questions, Chair Lady.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Are there questions? Question has been called on the bill. Are there any objections to calling the question? Seeing none, we are voting on House Bill 2196. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 2196 moves on to calendar and rules.
Well, thank you, Chair Lady.
Thank you.
And if you would allow me, I'd like to just address just a comment to Representative Freeman. I am your friend as well, sir.
But you only came down here because you had a bill. You didn't come to watch him in action. Item number 7 on our calendar is House Bill 2088 by Chairman White. Chairman White, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman and committee.
We did
Members,
have a
the-
motion and a second. We did. Thank you. You're recognized.
Okay. Members, originally, many of our universities of higher education were established to train teachers. We call them our training schools. And as a result of that, some of our universities, we have 2 in the state right now, one in West Tennessee and one in East Tennessee. They have campus schools, and they have on campus a K through 3 or K through 6 or K through 12 campus, and they use that to help train their teachers. Well, right now, they contract with the LEA in which they are domiciled, in the county in which they're domiciled. This bill will allow them to contract with any LEA across the state, where they can expand the training of teachers in other communities. And that's basically what it does. This goes from the LEA that they contract, the LEA that where they're domiciled, to any of the basically 146 LEAs across the state.
You've heard the sponsor's explanation. Are there questions? Mr. Sponsor, if, for instance, one of these was domiciled in Shelby County and they chose to contract with someone in Rutherford County and provide that training there, then the school would be incumbent upon them to provide for transportation and housing and all of those things. How would that work?
It is permissive, it'd be a mutual agreement. The university doesn't have to do this. Some of them want to, or one in particular that I work with, they want to. It would allow them, there wouldn't be, if it's, depends on where it's domiciled in that area, no, there wouldn't be required by the local community to do transportation or anything.
I see no other questions. Without objection, we're voting on House Bill 2088. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 2088 moves on to calendar and rules.
Thank you very much.
Item number 8 on the calendar is House Bill 800 by Representative Griffey. Representative Griffey, you have a motion and a second.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There is an amendment that corrects the physical note and turns it into non-significant. The amendment is numbered 01343.
I have 013143.
I'm sorry, I mispronounced. You're correct, Madam Chair.
All right. We have a motion. We have a second on the amendment. We have a motion and a second. Would you please, the amendment makes the bill?
Well, it just fixes the physical note on it, turns it from a significant to a non-significant.
All right, we will vote on the amendment and then hear about the bill as amended. Without objection, we are voting on amendment drafting code 013143. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. If you'd like to be recorded as a no, then please see the clerk. We are now on House Bill 800 as amended. Representative Griffey, you are recognized on the bill as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. House Bill 800 seeks to address what I think a vast majority of Tennessee parents would like to see happen in our public schools, and that is for our schools to focus student attention on academic curriculum critical for student success, such as reading, science, and mathematics. And number 2, outside of teen pregnancy prevention, abstinence, or sexual disease prevention and transmission, I think most parents would like a sexuality of our children to be left to our parents in the home and not a part of a school curriculum. And that a vast number of parents also feel like that materials that promote LGBTQ issues and lifestyles should be subject to the same restrictions and limitations that there are on other religious teachings that are not allowed in our schools. So what House Bill 800 would just say, past the effective date of July 1st, 2022, that the State Textbook Commission shall not recommend or approve materials that for use in public schools that promote, normalize, support, or address lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender issues or lifestyles. That's what the bill does.
All right, you've heard the explanation. I believe Representative Freeman, you have a question?
Yes, and Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Griffey, we had quite a heated debate about this last time, and I feel like I may have personally offended you. I apologize for that, and that wasn't my intent. But I am going to continue to advocate for the LGBTQ community, and implore us to allow these people to see themselves in books, in the libraries. People go to school to broaden their horizons, to learn about different cultures, and to learn about different people, different lifestyles, socioeconomic groups, different races and religions, and not allowing any books that promote, normalize, support, address lesbian, gay, transgender issues or lifestyles, I think is not the direction we should go. And well, with that, that's all I've got to say.
Is there any other discussion? Representative Miller?
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Mr. Representative, this is the first opportunity I've actually had to see the bill. And the fact that we're in Finance Committee and you went immediately to the physical note saying that it was insignificant. But as I'm reading this, I want to ask you questions about gay, bisexuals, transgenders, and the bill simply says that there would be no promotions or normalization of this subject matter. And I sit here and I'm thinking, oh man, this land of the free, this America, what makes us great? The fact that we are free. And right now, our nation we're putting ourselves in harm's way, trying to say to a foreign country, we will stand by you and we will fight for you at some point. We will fight for you in order to maintain democracy, freedom. And as I read this, it's like saying to, I don't know, 1,000 lesbians in this state. I don't know how many lesbians in this state, or 1,000 transgenders, or I don't know. Do you know how many gay individuals are in this state? Just a question.
No.
How about lesbian? Do you know how many?
No.
You have any idea?
No.
Let's assume there are thousands of Tennessee citizens that are gay, that are lesbians. But what you're imposing, what you're saying to them and to the rest of us, we don't really want to know that you're here. We don't want our children to know that you're here. We don't even want our children, we don't want to know that you even exist. That's exactly what this bill is saying. How un-American that is. I mean, I can't support because it's really almost embarrassing to think that this is something we want to impose on our citizens. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Representative Griffey, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill simply tries to provide fairness regarding what materials are in our schools. Because if I had materials from a Christian religion that was directly opposed to LGBTQ lifestyles and sexuality and so forth, I'm sure you would oppose that being part of the school curriculum. So my solution for the parents that have objections to sexuality being a part of the school curriculum is simply to remove it. And that's what this bill simply tries to do. Thank you.
Representative Miller, did you have follow-up? Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is my famous quote of the year. Nobody else may not think anything about it, but this is my famous quote of the year. And I take this from the wisest man that ever lived on this earth, Solomon. It's found in Proverbs 23:7. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he.
Chairman Todd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I do agree with the sponsor that the vast majority of our citizens expect this type of material to not be in their public schools. If they want to teach it at home, they're free to do that. We're not restricting free speech whatsoever. We're not dictating that folks of this lifestyle should change anything. This is strictly what our public dollars, what our taxpayers are paying for on a day-to-day basis, and promoting and being promoted in our school system. So I appreciate you bringing this, and thank you for this effort.
Thank you.
Representative Ogles, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to the sponsor, is it the intent of the legislation, does the legislation address sexual preferences between a man and a woman?
Representative Griffey.
The bill simply says that notwithstanding Section 49, Title 49, Section 6, Chapter 6, Section 2201 H9B, the commission shall not recommend or list, the state board shall not approve for local adoption or grant a waiver pursuant to 49.6/2206, and the LEA and public charter schools shall not locally adopt or use in public schools of this state textbook and instructional materials or supplemental instructional materials that promote, normalize, support, or address lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender issues or lifestyles. That's all the bill does.
Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to the sponsor, I just wish the legislation would have been broader in the fact that it would take in all sexual preferences. I think that's something is for to be discussed in the home and by the parents, and has no place in our public education system for any person, group. I hate to see something that's specific and narrow that could have been broadly applied to everyone. Thank you.
Representative Griffey.
I would certainly welcome any amendment that limits the teachings or promotion of any particular sexuality in schools to prohibit that. That's something I believe belongs in the home with the parents and not in our schools, because having a school provide that to the students as part of a class structure is a captured audience, and students don't have a choice of what's presented to them, and parents want that choice themselves for their child.
All right, are there further questions? Seeing none, we are voting on moving forward House Bill 800. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. The ayes have it. House Bill 800 moves on to calendar and rules.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee.
Item number 9 on our calendar is House Bill 1921 by Representative Wright. We have a motion and a second. Representative Wright, you're recognized on your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We did that.
Representative Freeman is my friend also.
I have gained Representative Freeman many friends today, I'm quite sure.
But then let me also clarify that statement. I see 19 other friends that I have in here also, especially the ones that sit down here close to help move the presenters along.
Representative Wright, would you please discuss your bill?
House Bill 1921 is amended. If I could have a moment of personal privilege concerning Staff Sergeant Ryan Christian Knaus. He was the last soldier killed in action in Afghanistan. He grew up in northeast Knox County with his parents, with his grandparents, and it's where he met his wife. He was a graduate of Gibbs High School. This bill will memorialize a section of State Route 331 and 131 in his name. I stand for questions and ask for your kind consideration.
Are there questions? I know that we all would certainly join with Representative Wright in wishing to recognize someone who gave his life for this country and tragically at the end of a conflict and just minutes or hours from being safely on his way home. So thank you for bringing this bill. We will be voting without objection on House Bill 1921. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. And again, thank you, Representative Wright, for bringing this bill to us.
And Madam Chair, if I might have a moment, there is one more bill to be presented by Chairman Crawford. I will remain in the room, and if there are people here who would like to sign on to this bill, I have a sign-on sheet with me.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Representative
Madam
Wright. We're happy to have you join us, but just know we will go directly into budget hearings once we finish our calendar. So we aren't completing our business at the close of calendar.
Thank you. Thank you.
The last item on our calendar for today is, as Representative Wright has already alluded to, by Chairman Crawford, House Bill 2005. Do I have a motion? I have a motion and a second. Chairman Crawford, you're recognized on your bill.
Madam Chair, may I present from my seat?
You may.
Thank you. This is House Bill 2005. This bill seeks to amend the reciprocity issue. This bill will allow for massage therapists to be able to get a temporary license to continue practicing in the state of Tennessee until they can take the board test to be certified in the state. This was brought to me by a citizen in my district who basically was a massage therapist for 30 years in California. She moved to Tennessee and come to find out she couldn't practice here. So what this does is gives them enough time to get on the list to be able to take the test and become certified in the state and allow them to continue working under the supervision of another licensed massage therapist in the state.
Question? You've heard the answer. Question has been called on the bill. Without objection, we are voting on House Bill 2005. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 2005 moves on to calendar and rules. That does complete all the bills that we have calendared for today. We will now continue to going to budget hearings, and I see Commissioner Swin here. She is on deck and ready. So first up will be the Department of Education. We will have the Department of Education's expansion request that will follow their budget hearing as well. So we are out of session, and members, your dashboard, you will be able to see all the presentation documents there. There are some paper copies around, I believe, as well. So Commissioner Swin, welcome. Thank you for joining us and bringing your team. And we know that there are a few things going on in your department these days, so we do appreciate the time and look forward to hearing your presentation. So just feel free to jump right in.
Yes, ma'am. So I will introduce myself and the team. Penny Schwinn, Commissioner of Education.
Sam Piercy, Deputy Commissioner.
Charlie Bufalino, Assistant Commissioner of Policy and Legislative Affairs.
Mary Ann Dursky, Director of Local Finance, Interim CFO.
Shannon Gordon, Chief Operating Officer.
Eve Carney, Chief of Districts and Schools.
Thank you, Commissioner. We welcome all of you, and as I said, feel free to just jump right into the presentation.
Yes, ma'am. So to start, wanted to briefly walk you through the cost increases proposed for this year. First and foremost, we have the Tennessee Safe Schools, the floodplain relocation work. That again, in the governor's proposed budget is to consider those schools and buildings where we have students who are in those spaces that are at high risk for floods. This is certainly in response to the catastrophic flooding that we saw in Humphreys. Want to make sure that we can be preventative in the future. A couple of other notes that I would have on this particular slide. We have the basic education program growth and inflationary costs as we do each and every year. We also have the additional funding for summer camps. That was a really important piece of legislation you all passed last year. It was about looking at learning acceleration for students, and we had just a tremendous first year. You all were the first legislature or legislative body in the country to take that kind of action in regards to recovering from the pandemic and learning loss and student acceleration. We had tremendous participation, and it was actually just a really wonderful and magical experience. Our districts did a beautiful job. This continues that funding into the second year in response to that legislation. Another big point that I would note is the $500 million for the innovative school models. That is a proposal in the governor's budget related to high school and middle school CTE, really wanting to make sure that we can continue to expand those work streams within schools, specifically at the high school level. $1 million for every high school in the state, $500,000 for every middle school in the state. And that is intended to ensure that all students, regardless of where they live, have access and opportunity to CTE programs that align to the regional and statewide workforce. And so really wanting to invest in our middle and high school spaces. And so then last but not least, some of the other programs that we have here, the Future Workforce Initiative, continuation, expansion of the Charter School Facilities Fund, and then some additional support for teacher training and experience. We have that with our state special schools each and every year. Next, in terms of our reduction plan, this is kind of a standard ask and request. This is a proportional response to some of the, that is reflective of what is currently in place. So this is what our reduction plan would be. In terms of just briefly some of the highlights that you see, we divided this into our 3 strategic priority areas. First, in academics, want to really highlight the work coming off of the Literacy Success Act from special session last January. We have had the opportunity to go through a full year of professional development and support. We've had over 12,000 teachers participate in training with 97% satisfaction rate. That is typically 60 to 75%. So we're very excited about that and implementation. We've also seen that over 57,000 families have ordered free at-home decodables, with over 178,000 families having access to online and text apps for literacy. Tennessee All-Core, you also passed last special session, 150,000 seats in addition to high school seats for online tutoring, plus community micro grants for families and community grants for high dosage tutoring. Second, just want to highlight some of the great work of school districts this year. Even with the pandemic last year and even with some disruptions this year, they've been incredible in terms of the programs that they've been able to implement and frankly expand. I really want to draw your attention to the last bullet around increased opportunities. We increased work-based learning as a state higher than pre-pandemic numbers. So in the 2017-18 school year, we had 7,500 students who were participating in work-based learning. Districts actually expanded and increased that number even during the pandemic, and now we're at 33,731. It is just one example of how Tennessee school districts and schools have continued to push through aggressively. We've also seen that expansion with our STEM designation schools, more applications than ever before. We've seen expanded programs with innovative school models across the state. They're really looking to find more creative and innovative ways to push the envelope and ensure strong outcomes for students. And we are seeing that that is in large part how they are choosing to spend their federal relief dollars as well. The only other thing I would bring up on this line is some consolidation and efficiencies. We partnered with the Niswonger Foundation for AP Access for All. That essentially allows every student in the state, if the district participates, to have access to AP classes online. it expanded access significantly. And you see some of those percentages here, 142% increase in South Central Tennessee, 71% increase in access for those students in Northwest Tennessee. Those are just a couple of examples, but we do have over 469 schools onboarded in 88% of our districts. Again, more students than ever before can access these opportunities. And I just want to note, we are one of the only states that are seeing growth in student access and opportunity coming out of the pandemic. And it is because of partners in the regions across the state as well as the districts and their work. And then finally, as educators, we are really focusing on grow your own. Of course, we're very proud, Tennessee being the first state in the country to be have teaching an apprenticeable profession. That means that we've opened up workforce dollars that can be used to help with tuition costs and reduce the financial barriers to becoming a teacher. We've also, as you can see here, increased the number of opportunities for existing teachers to have dual endorsements in special education and ESL, as well as teachers to be able to participate in aspiring assistant principal networks, wanting to make sure that there's a really strong recruitment and retention pipeline for our folks, in addition to the salary increases that you all consider every single year. So these are some of the big things that we've done, but happy to answer any and all questions that you have. And thank you for the time, Chair Lady.
Thank you, Commissioner. I know that we do have several questions. I want to go back before I forget, just a couple of things on the slide. The first slide with the cost increases, the innovative middle and high school career and CTE.
Yes, ma'am.
And we had a brief conversation about this in another meeting, but if I understand correctly, this $500 million will provide $1 million to every high school, $500,000 to every middle school, and that is regardless of size or student enrollment, which seems a bit counterintuitive. So can you speak to, why that wouldn't be a grant pool and it wouldn't be prorated per capita, what the thinking is behind that, if you will?
Absolutely. And so one of the things that we wanted to ensure is that a lot of what we are seeing is that those initial costs for expanding programs have to do with the cost of equipment and those first expenses for starting programs. So whether you have one student using 3D technology or welding equipment or medical equipment, or you have 1,000 students, you still have those upfront purchases. We wanted to ensure that all districts, regardless of their high school size, have the same access and opportunity. We have some districts that are quite small, and so there wouldn't be enough students that would generate a meaningful enough amount to be able to create these innovative programs. And this is really about kind of that fairness, access, opportunity for all kids, regardless of where they live. The $1 million does allow for every high school to start at least 2 innovative programs within their high schools. And at the middle school level, it allows for that same backwards mapping for CTE programs to begin in that critical 8th grade, as well as some career exploration. So that was some of the thinking behind it, the sunk cost of equipment purchases, starting new programs, or innovating what is currently in place.
And I guess I get that, but I still am having a hard time getting my head around, if you have a high school with 2,000 students, you're going to need more of that equipment than if you have a high school with, 400. So
Sure.
that maybe is just an item that we can continue to have some additional discussion about.
Absolutely.
And on the slide about the innovative school models, the last bullet point, which is amazing, with the growth, 4 times the growth really in the number of students involved in workplace opportunities. Is that spread across the state? Is there concentration in certain areas, or where are we seeing that growth?
Sure. And we have our Chief of Student Readiness, Jean Luna, here, who can answer a number of those questions. But what I think we have seen across the state is we do have pockets of districts who were able to expand on the work that they are already doing, but we are seeing expansion across the state. And one of the things that I've been most proud of and excited about in terms of what districts have been able to do is it's this idea of not hunkering down, but accelerating forward. And they've really been launching those relationships and partnerships at the local level to continue to expand statewide. So Jean, I'm not sure if you have additional context you'd like to provide.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, we have seen an expansion across all regions in work-based learning. What I would say is we're also working very closely with those that did see some declines and identifying what those barriers are and working with them as well.
Thank you. And Commissioner, pardon us, but you are running a far second to ice cream at this moment. But
I get that at home too. Yeah. I was going to say, my
Leader
girls would
Lambert.
agree with you, ma'am.
Madam Chairman, I believe the Chairman Zachary may be bringing a bit of ice cream there to the commissioner. We don't want her to feel left out. So, that doesn't happen every day when in your committee, but I commend Chairman Zachary on him being just very kind to our guest. And it may be an indication that we could be here for a while today. I'm not sure, but enjoy the ice cream.
Thank you.
Well, and Commissioner, I will tell you that he offered it to me first. So just again. All right, we do have serious questions on our agenda for today, beginning with Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and Commissioner. Out of what is potentially going to be a $9 billion budget for your department this year, I know this will sound like a relatively small question, but it's extremely important to many of our beginning teachers. So the Grow Your Own initiative is geared toward establishing partnerships between the education preparation providers and LEAs to provide no-cost pathways for the teaching profession. You and I have spoken about, and your team has actually been very helpful in helping educate me on how new teachers come into the system. In fact, I've said publicly, I'm very proud. My little brother Nathan is a 7th grade math teacher, and that is what he's doing right now. So I've seen some of this, and he wasn't able to take advantage necessarily of this program. But can the department provide an update on this program? Are we seeing it be successful attracting the people that we need into the teaching profession? And then what's the turnover rate for that program? To not only just attract new teachers in, but keep the ones that we have?
Yeah, great questions. And so we're still in the infancy of the program. So the first in the state launched in late 2018, early 2019. And so what we're seeing is that those teachers are in their first year this year. So it's certainly we are looking at how they are progressing throughout the year. We still have those instructional walkthroughs. We have expanded very quickly. So what was one program is now 65 across the state, plus the new apprenticeship model that was just approved by the U.S. Department of Labor. What we are seeing is that we are getting significant more variance. So more teachers who are targeted in high needs areas. So science, math, special education, ESL. We are also seeing that they are teachers who are from the communities they are then going to serve. Over time, what we've seen in the research and certainly in Tennessee is that those who teach where they grew up are more likely to stay. We are also seeing that those teachers who had a strong mentor or someone they learned under are more likely to be high achieving teachers in terms of student achievement and retention later. So both of those factors are at play here. We do expect with this initial group that again is in kind of their first year, as we are watching them, we have very high expectations of what this can mean for expansion. We like that there's now a sustainable option in place that doesn't require additional funds, but it's about strategic allocation of funds that already exist.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and Commissioner. That is a very good overview of kind of what the program is. If one of your team can get into the details a bit, I mean, how many teachers do we have taking advantage of this right now, and kind of what's the turnover rate been for those? And I know it's very early in the program, but what does that look like?
There you go. Sure. So right now in the 65 programs, we have about 650 teachers. On average, and this again is an average, we have anywhere from 1,000 to 1,150 vacancies in the state. And again, that's a point in time data that we get in terms of a survey. So it covers over half of what we would expect for those vacancies, which is a really important first step. In terms of some of our other programs, we have special education endorsement seats. Those are for existing teachers who might, and you think about an elementary school teacher, maybe a district has more elementary school teachers than seats available. These teachers can get their endorsement at no cost from this, paid for by the state in special education, ESL, math, science. And we have 5,525 seats there. Almost all of them are filled. And then on top of that, we also have the Aspiring Assistant Principal and Diverse Leader Networks. Those are also to bring more people into the profession and be able to progress through that. And we fill 700 seats essentially within the first 2 years. So really strong interest and participation. Again, we'll get you that data at the end of this year in terms of what the success of passing the praxis, entering and staying in the profession are.
Thank you. And the only other issue I'll mention is that on entry into the system, one thing I did kind of see just watching again my little brother go through that process, it is
the waiver process itself is a little slower. And I know I've talked with some of your team about that. One of the things to think about just as you're looking at this program and bringing new teachers in, those waivers, they can only do a waiver once they've been admitted into a program to get their certification, but they're given a significant amount of time to actually complete that program, which makes sense. That seems upside down to me. We'll go ahead and let them get the waiver, get them into the classroom, get them teaching, and still make sure that they get into whatever program they need to. But putting the program in ahead of the waiver basically just slows them down by about a month. And so just something to think about as we go through this. And thank you for continuing to try to encourage young folks to come into the teaching profession. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And a follow up on that for all of us up here, but also for the people who might be watching at home. If someone is interested in doing this, how do they find out about the program? How do they engage in it? Is it through their local LEA? Is it through your department? How would someone who thinks they'd like to make a career change or whatever get the information and find the pathway to get into this program?
Sure. So if they're already in a school district, their local district is going to be the best point of contact. For those career changers, they can be in touch with the department. I am going to give her name out. Megan McElroy is our cabinet chief who is in charge of that work. And she will certainly be able to help direct to the best next step. One of the things we are looking at as a department is we have a lot of our smaller districts who just don't have the back office to be able to create these programs for maybe it's 2 or 3 teachers a year. And so we have gotten the request of, can you start a statewide model that we can just direct people to you and you can help those 2 or 3 vacancies that we have every year that we can't find. And we're a very, very small district. We don't have the staff. So that is something that the department has heard quite frequently, especially with the apprenticeship program and Grow Your Own. And so we will be taking steps to be able to offer that service to our smaller districts as well. And that's probably 2 months away.
Thank you. I think it's very important, obviously, to utilize the people that we already have in the system, but with teacher retirements that we're facing and all of the other workforce issues that they're not unique to teaching, but teaching is certainly a part of that, then I think being more creative about attracting other people from other fields and helping them get into the profession without a lot of obstacles could be very helpful.
Absolutely.
Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner, and your team for being here today. We
Yes, sir.
appreciate all that you do. A year ago, the state enacted the Tennessee Literacy Success Act, Learning Loss Remediation, and the Student Acceleration Act. Sorry. Please provide an update on the progress of the Literacy Success Act, and have universal screeners been deployed?
Yes, sir. So the Literacy Success Act is well underway. We're really excited about kind of this first year of implementation. So we did do the summer training. Over 12,000 teachers have participated, 97% satisfaction rate. We are doing walkthroughs in partnership with districts to be able to see about what implementation of that training looks like in terms of phonics-based instruction. So that's been really positive. The next component of that is on educator preparation providers. One of the requirements within the act was to ensure that ed preps shift and think about how they are preparing our future teachers with a really sounds first phonics driven set of instructional materials that they are using in their coursework. Those grants have been allocated, those courses and content have been developed by our ed preps in partnership with the department and are being used in ed preps now. So that was that preventative measure. You kind of have the PD, but you want to make sure that forevermore we don't have to continue to train teachers and support them. So that's been going really well. We appreciate the partnerships there. And then frankly, the families and community component is really important. I think that's actually what makes the act and certainly the work that we're doing as a state much different than other states. We have tens of thousands of families who are actively participating, whether that is signing up for a text app, whether that is ordering decodables, whether that is watching the PBS kind of small, starting with sounds programs that we have, lots and lots of engagement there. And so we are tracking those metrics as well. We're continuing to see an increase in terms of active parent participation. So that's also been something incredibly positive. With the universal screener, we just finished our second window in February. I think this is the first year of that implementation. We did have all but one district successfully participate within that window. We did have the data back. We literally just got that back this morning from the first administration to the second. What I can say is that kindergarten and first grade are showing remarkable gains in the state, significantly higher than we would have expected. That is very, very good news for early literacy development. We know that our second and third graders have been the grades that are the most impacted by the challenges related to the pandemic. Our second and third graders now are those kinders and first graders from a few years ago. They are significantly farther behind because they had more disruption in really critical years. We have seen a little bit of challenged progress there. That is to be expected. We are still seeing really good growth in those grades. So very, very optimistic about what this means for literacy in the state. Also, just want to say that having this data is really important because now we know where to target more resources, resources that exist that we can redeploy elsewhere. And certainly we're getting that good information and data about how we can support our districts.
Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So specifically, do you know how many children were identified as having significant reading deficiencies?
We can get that data for you in terms of what it looked like in the fall versus what it looked like in the winter.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
And then the literacy, I can't, sorry, ice
No,
cream.
no worries.
Success Act, literacy. This is a testimony of why what you do is important. The Literacy Success Act requires the department to establish at least one free professional development course on foundational literacy skills, introduction for K through 5 grade teachers. Has this course been implemented? And if so, what is the participation rate?
Yep. So this is that 2-week course. One was online and one was over the summer. That's the 10 to 12,000. It's 12,000 kind of when you think about administrators and everyone involved who have participated. So very significant numbers. And then that's where we had the 97% satisfaction rate, 97% rate of intent to implement in classrooms. And we're doing those walkthroughs now. The one thing I didn't mention is we just announced a partnership with UT, the Reading Research Center. That was just announced on Saturday, and that is a partnership where UT will do a significant amount of research, program evaluations, and provide resources to school districts as an independent third party to evaluate the success of the Literacy Success Act and its implementation. So we're really excited to have that partnership and that third party review of the progress that our districts are making. Thank you, sir.
Next on the list, Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Swin, I know you and your team are proud of the literacy initiatives and the summer camps, and so I have a few questions about those. First, maybe, could you give us some measures on how the summer camps from 2021 increased outcomes, like maybe the percent reading on grade level, some kind of a measure like that?
Yes, sir. So one of the things we're doing is we were able to look at the initial assessments that were provided as the pre and post tests for the summer program. I think lots of lessons learned in terms of how we're going to continue to strengthen that, keep them short, aligned to the TCAP, and also really make sure that we're utilizing the screener data that we now have available. What we are going to get for you now that we have the February data back from the Universal Screener is take those students that were participating in summer programs who took the fall and the winter screener compared to similar students who did not participate to show you what that difference is in growth throughout the year. We're also going to get you the information related to TCAP in the spring for those students who participated in summer programming and tutoring compared to similar peers who did not. We just got that screener data back literally this morning. And so we'll be happy to follow up to give you the very specifics on what those differences are between participants and non-participants.
Okay. And staying with the summer camps for just a second, do you have any idea what enrollment will be or what you expect it to be this summer of 2022, maybe compared to what it was in 2021?
Yeah. So I think the good news is we have more time to plan this year. So a lot of the resources are getting out earlier. A lot of the processes for district planning have started significantly earlier. We had just about 20% of our students in the elementary school grades participate in summer school last year. For K through 5, it was the largest proportion of summer school or summer programming participation that we were able to find in the country, very close to North Carolina. That was the only other state that was in the same ballpark. So amazing participation from students, but that meant really strong participation from teachers and principals and school staff as well. We do expect to continue to see those really strong numbers in the elementary grades. We were just over half of that size in middle school. That is to be expected. You tend to see slightly lower participation in those middle school grades. We do expect that will be consistent this summer, but it was very innovative and exciting programming. Our districts did an incredible job, and the teachers, the energy and love that you saw in the classrooms, even after a hard year, were some of the best visits that I've ever had. And I just thought that they did a remarkable job with their children.
Chairman Baum.
And one more question, maybe now touching on the literacy programs. Maybe I'll give you an opportunity to tell us something about the extent to which they have been successful, or maybe the extent to which they've had challenges.
Sure. And I think I appreciate you asking that. So it's all the things that I love, which is students and reading. And so for our Literacy Success Act and what districts have been able to do, we have incredible participation. So you think about districts who opted into additional support. We have 100 districts who said, I want to work with my peers, be able to provide additional coaching, administrative support, and peer mentoring for my teachers and our teachers to be able to implement best practices for literacy even more. We are seeing our districts coming together, participating in that professional development. We're seeing teachers who are implementing those really strong pedagogical practices in their classroom. But most importantly, it's about outcomes for kids. And so when we look at that universal screener data between the fall and the winter across the board statewide, we are seeing significantly more growth than we would have expected. We are attributing that to the hard work of teachers, principals, and districts in that professional development support. So they've done an incredible job. Students are working hard. We do expect that will continue through the spring.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Thank you, Commissioner, for coming. Something we talked about when Commissioner Mental Health was here was about the Mental Health Trust Fund, something I'm pretty passionate about. I think that one of the things that we're most proud of is putting $250 million aside last year, knowing that in this coming year, we'd be spending that money. I guess my question is, when I asked her about it, it's kind of new to everyone. I guess the question, she's saying she's collaborating with your department. I guess my point is where do we see this going? Obviously, we have some revenues that are starting to build there that we're going to make investments in, really clearly at your department's discretion, because you're the ones that know most about where the needs are for mental health for our K-12 students. And so I was wondering if you could give me an update on that and where your partnership is going with mental health.
Sure. So Commissioner Williams and I speak often, as you can imagine. We are also working with Dr. Luna's team. So Dr. Luna's team really oversees that work in partnership with Commissioner Williams' team. And so one of the things that we've been doing is a lot of co-planning, whether that is district landscape, to be able to get the need and the data from our districts about what is actually going to be helpful for them. Where do they see the needs? What are the existing resources that are already in place in schools and in communities where we can create more cohesion and collaboration? One of the things we don't want to do is allocate funds to just replicate or reinvent the wheel. We want to make sure that we're taking the existing resources, creating that cohesive strategy and plan, and then seeing, okay, what is still left? Where are those kind of open spots that we can start to use some of this funding to fill in based on the need of students? So it is about getting that landscape survey completed with our districts, looking at that data, doing the same thing with our community resource partners, and then being able to look at that data, mapping it, and then saying, here's where we think the biggest need is going to be. And that's the process that we are currently undergoing in partnership with that agency.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you for that. I guess obviously under the new funding formula, if we're able to kind of go that way, I know that we increase the number of counselors in there in all of our schools. I guess the question is, do you see these two new things kind of competing for dollars and clear direction, or how do you see them molding together? I guess I like what we're doing in both categories. I guess I just want to make sure that we're not we're not creating two silos as it relates to counselor and mental health, and that they're collaborating together.
Yeah, I think it's a really important and very good question, because one of the things that we know is that the money that can be allocated from the trust fund will help to create the systems and supports and programs that are necessary for our students in our schools. But it still requires that staff to help to implement the programs and provide some of those services. So you think about a partnership with 2 or 3 community organizations, that mental health trust fund funding can help with districts to establish those programs, resources for those one-time upfront costs. But you then need the people to carry out those same programs over time. And that's where I think they meet together. It does allow for students to continue to get those services that will help them accelerate their academic achievement. And this funding that can come from the trust fund, it is not intended to be ongoing, sustainable, recurring funding. It is one-time funding. You start up some programs, but you need that sustainable model. This is where those dovetail nicely together. Yes, sir.
Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all very much for what you all do. We are wholeheartedly love our public schools. And Penny, if I could say, when I've seen you speak, when I've seen you at the State of the State or whatnot, your enthusiasm for the kiddos is second to none. And I really appreciate that outward expression of how excited you are about what you do, because what you do and your staff and your team is very, very difficult. So I hope that for many folks that maybe follow you or they're involved in the educational system, that the enthusiasm you show spreads like wildfire. And that's a metaphor. I'm not saying I want wildfire, but I want your enthusiasm to spread like that. So I appreciate that. My question surrounds floodplains and schools that have been designated in floodplains that we are funding to replace. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is there's a newly designated school in a floodplain in my district, in my county. And I'm curious that, how many schools, if at all, the department has identified for relocation, and are there other schools which are located in floodplains? So kind of give me an idea of, have y'all been working towards what schools are in floodplains?
Absolutely. So I'm going to turn that over to Shannon Gordon, and I know she's been working closely with TEMA on that information. So
TEMA has been working to identify sort of high risk and medium risk schools in the floodplain. TEMA has been challenged a little bit, and some of that data is outdated, quite honestly. And the topography has changed and needs to be addressed. And so we took an opportunity to go back and look at all schools across the state and identify schools based on the most recent criteria that would qualify to be designated as high or medium. We're recommending that a comprehensive needs assessment be done on those schools that rank as high or medium, so that we can really assess what the need is to mitigate those safety risks. In some cases, it could be a relocation of the entire building. In some cases, it could be something as simple as building a flood wall to mitigate the risk. So rather than commit at this stage to individual allocations for schools, we think it's best to take a few months and conduct that comprehensive needs assessment, identify what those facility needs, and then tier our funding support for those districts, along with asking districts to help contribute some resources to those solutions, so that we make sure that the money is going to mitigate the risk and that we're able to stretch those dollars as far as we can.
Okay. So I would say the schools are still being identified under your cooperation with TEMA.
Correct.
And I know this is probably not something you'd be able to answer for the TEMA if you're in a floodplain, I think there's a risk, right? And so it's going to be up to TEMA whether or not this school or the particular location is in a low risk area for a flood zone. Is that my understanding of your answer?
Yes, I think what we're looking for is to identify additional data about the facilities. So we have some facilities that were built knowing they were in a flood zone, and the construction may have better supported and addressed safety risks at the pre-construction stage, versus others that did not. And so we really do think it is a critical first step to do that needs assessment, so that we know what those risks are, so that we make sure the resources are addressing the specific risks of the individual building, which may vary from school to school.
Okay. And I would assume there's teams of engineers, et cetera, that are going to be making those particular conclusions. And I would also assume the $200 million that's been allocated, that's where this is being paid from. is to figure out, that leads to my next question is, do we have enough money? If we spend $25 million on figuring out the problem, then we've got $175 million to actually fix the problem. Do we have any idea that we're going to have enough money to address, if we do have medium to high risk schools and flood zones, that we can take care of these schools to get them out of that flood zone, even if the money dries up? How would we address if we spend all the money?
I'll take a part of that and then turn it back over to Shannon. So I think that one of the most important things is that TEMA does support a lot of that initial work. It does open up the possibility of some additional federal dollars for that support, which will, and so when we have these assessments, it opens up more opportunity for additional funds. I do know in conversations with the governor's office, when we think about the safety of our students, and I know you feel strongly about this as well, we want to make sure our kids are safe. That's the big promise we make. We drop them off. We want to make sure we get them safe and sound home at the end of the day. And so that is a real priority. I think we had some very hard lessons learned over the last year in Humphreys. And so this is something that's really important to me as a mom who sends her kids to school every day. I think there's a real commitment to keeping kids safe, but it does open up those federal dollars. I don't know if Shannon, there's additional.
Yeah, I think the benefit of tiering is we're able to stretch the dollars further, as the commissioner mentioned, really able to leverage potentially other federal funding streams to match that. But I also think that the governor's office has a commitment. If we find and do this assessment and find we need more, that's probably a future request coming back so that we can make sure we're making investments to keep our kids safe on the right things.
Well, great. I really appreciate you all responding to this question, because in Humphreys County, if this happened during the week, we would be having a very different conversation and stuff happening on a Saturday when the school's vacant. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Commissioner, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here, you and your staff. And before I get started, I guess let me just say to the gentleman to the right of you, I want to thank personally Sam and Charlie. They have taken every call that I have reached out to them. So I really do appreciate the work that they're doing. I know they're working hard, as you are, and the rest of your team, to make sure we get this funding formula right. And with that said, I do have some questions regarding the funding formula. And so I have many questions about the base. And so let's just start there. And I'm going to let you just explain the base, go into detail about the base as much as you can, and let us know exactly what is included in that base, how is it calculated, and then hopefully you'll answer my questions and we can move on to the next one.
Sure. So I'm going to get my TISA binder, which is going to take a second, mostly because the BEP took up a lot of inches in this thing. So in terms of the base, what we did is we took the components of the BEP. Now we know there are 46 components of the BEP, but when you break another TISA binder, but when you break up those 46 components of the BEP, it's over 125 individual lines that then get calculated. So it is pages and pages and pages. In fact, the computation guide is something like 85 pages long. When you try to take that, what we did is we said, here are the things that would naturally fall in the weights. And that is limited to at-risk, special education, and ESL. You have the things in the direct, which are CTE and ACT. Everything else is something that would fall into the base. When you look at how much money has been put into the base, it's $6.6 billion. When you look at what that would have been in the BEP, it's just shy of $6.5 billion. So in short, everything that is funded in the BEP is currently in the base, outside of the things I mentioned that are in the weights and in direct funding. That additional just over $114 million helps to pay for the additional and the more competitive ratios for counselors and nurses. It also supports getting slightly more competitive, though it does not meet that national standard, for school psychologists. Those were the three things that came up the most. We also have some additional support, although it was minimal, based on the BEP Review Committee's last report, for RTI. That's where you get that $114 million or so. What we can provide to you is actually showing what those ratios are. One of the things that I want to be very, very clear about is currently in the BEP, if we just take, let's say, counselors, or we just take librarians, a child who goes to a school of 264 children, walks half a mile down the road, goes to a school with 270 children. That child generates different funding in the BEP, because some schools generate a full principal if you have 266 students. But if you have 261 students, then you generate half of a principal. So those are the kinds of things that make it really hard to get to the per student level within the BEP. That's why we took it at the state level and said 6.5 billion is essentially what's in the base. We added just over 100 million to that number.
All right, so let's talk about, you mentioned teachers. So let's talk about how are teachers funded? What's the base salary going to be with the new funding?
So the numbers that are currently within the BEP and what we projected those to be within fiscal year 24, we are using those same numbers for our projections. Districts will have their own salary schedules and they will compensate on those salary schedules, but we did not make changes in terms of that value outside of what we would expect to be that normal increase that we are projecting for fiscal year 23.
Okay, so does this affect the minimum salary at all that teachers?
So in the
Okay.
bill, yes, sir. So in the bill, what would happen is every time you all decide to increase teacher salaries in the state, so let's say you put in $100 million for teacher salaries in fiscal year 26, hypothetically. What that would do is it would say the state board would then be required to increase the minimum salary schedule commensurate with that $100 million. So you could say if we were at $40,000 as a minimum salary, which is what the department plans to propose to the state board this summer, if they're at $40,000, you put another 100 million, then the state board would need to increase that salary schedule by another $1,000 to 41,000. So it does ensure that when you put in that recurring funding for educator salaries, it is forever more and not just a one-time increase that teachers might see. We want to make sure that is a standard recurring increase over time.
Okay, and then shifting gears just a little bit to the fiscal capacity for the locals.
Mhm.
So I know with this new funding, we're talking about the SEBRA model versus TASER. So talk about those two a little bit. And I know you have before, but talk about why you decided to go with SEBRA over TASER. Talk about, I know SEBRA kind of looks at, the two funding sources for locals. I know it looks at property taxes as well as sales tax.
Mhm.
And I know, of course, when we get into TASER and what they do, it's a little more complicated. So talk about why you decided as a team to go with SEBRA.
Sure. And so I do want to start by saying the department does not personally have a preference in that way outside of what we heard from stakeholder feedback. That is ultimately, it is still 30% of the base and the weights. How that gets divided up does not impact what the formula generates. So that is certainly something we would defer to the General Assembly on. One of the things that I just want to be clear about is for SEBRA, here's the feedback that we heard. Number one, we heard lots of feedback to go to a one calculation model. So no longer using two calculations that we then average. That was a significant piece of feedback. The second piece of feedback we heard is what does the research say and what do other states do? States have largely moved to what is considered to be a simple model, which is more of the SEBRA model. When you look at similar states, so non-income tax states, almost all of them have moved to the simple calculation model, just like most states have moved to the student-based formula model. So that was the second consideration. The third consideration is we tried to look back at any kind of legislative intent that was through discussions. Back in 2016, the only thing that we could see is that there was an interest to move to the SEBRA model, but it did require significant additional state funds, which were not available at the time. So when we looked at all three of those things together, that was the starting point. But again, the department, it's still 30% of the base and the weights. How that gets split up amongst districts is certainly something that there is no kind of stated preference from the department on. That's the feedback that we heard.
Okay, and then finally, my last question deals with the local contribution.
Mhm.
So my understanding is for the next 4 years, there's kind of a hold harmless, I guess, for the locals. So is that true? And second of all, will that particular language about locals being held harmless, is that actually in the bill? Is it written in there? Where will we see that?
So I want to split apart a conversation about the local contribution and hold harmless. So a hold harmless is related to any districts who had significant declining enrollment over time, and it is essentially making sure that they are made whole. So you think about a district that might have lost 20% of their students. We want to make sure in the first year they would get the same amount as the prior year, and then it stair steps down 75%, 50%, 25%. Now, to be clear, that is different than what we do now, where it's kind of a almost a forevermore kind of a model, but that's the hold harmless. That's about like individual districts. If we are just talking about local contribution, it's not a pause or a freeze or a hold harmless. I know that's been used. What we did is we actually said of that 30% that all the districts need to fund together, we are actually lowering that total bill. So if you think about it like a restaurant, this is the bill that all the districts get. You're all sitting around a table, all the districts have to pay this bill. That is what fiscal capacity is how do you divide up the bill? What we did is instead of saying the bill is what it is, we took the bill and reduced the total amount that is owed. So we actually started from a lower place. So what is happening is over the next 5 years, it's still increasing. It is just at a lower amount than what they pay now. And so that's why you'll see in this 5-year projection, there isn't an increase to that bill because we've set the bill lower. And that happens until fiscal year 27. And in fiscal year 27, that's when that bill starts to get back to where it is now. So if we're here, we set it down here. So this is fiscal year 24, 25, 26, 27. And when you start moving past, that's where you move beyond where we are at the bill now.
And so, and Chair Lady, I'm almost finished. So when you talk about the base, we see that 70-30.
Mhm.
But for instance, my school district back in Rogersville City, our capacity is 20%. So we're actually 80-20. So when we hear that 70-30, that doesn't necessarily equal what our districts as a whole. So if you point out Chairman
right.
Williams, his capacity in Cookville there is going to be different. So when
That's
you
right.
say 70-30, that may not be 70-30. Like Rogersville City against 80-20. Hancock County, I think it's actually 90-10. So that 70-30 is just on average, correct?
So yes, sir. So there's three different terms I'll say. So there's local share, and that is the 70-30. That means of the whole formula, that's potentially $9 billion, the base and the weights component of that, the local share is 30% of that cost. Then you get to the local contribution. That's the dollar amount that each individual owes into that pot. When you're talking about fiscal capacity, it's how you split up the different pieces of the pie. So I'm not sure if Sam or, okay, nope, they're like, yep, keep going with that. So if you take what it is, that 30%, right? That is local share. That is 30% of the base and the weights. All the districts together owe that bill. The local contribution is the dollar amount that districts have to pay. When you get to fiscal capacity, that is the determination of what percent of that bill each district has to pay. So you might take a district that has low property wealth and that does not have a lot of sales tax. They're likely in that 90-10. That's probably where they're at. You take a district that has really high property values and a lot of people spend money there, sales tax is high, they are going to pay a larger percentage of what that 30% is. Just one other example I'm going to give in terms of why it works that way. And I want to be clear, every state applies a fiscal capacity model. That is not Tennessee specific. It is not specific even to this formula. That is how the BEP works now. It has 3 different shares. So you have a 75-25, a 70-30, and a 50-50, right? So now you have 3 of them. But what it means is it's saying if you are in Wilson County and you are driving into Nashville to go to a concert, go to dinner, and shop at the mall, Wilson County dollars are being spent in Metro Nashville, that is generating the sales tax. Then there's still Wilson County residents paying money into Metro Nashville area, generating additional sales tax. Those sales tax dollars in general are being spent for public education for the state. That is the theory behind fiscal capacity. It is why every state uses it across the country. It's also one of the things we have to apply. In the BEP, it's an average of 2 formulas and 3 different local share calculations. We want to move to 1 calculation, just CBER, and only 1 local share, which is 70-30. So really trying to streamline and simplify what is a very complicated process.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair Lady.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, your team, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate all the work that you've done with TISA. And if I could go down the line of Chairman Hicks, I've asked your staff to help work getting us some numbers on that year 2027.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you are doing that because that is one of the great concerns of local governments. We love what we're seeing right now for the first 4 years, but if we could get some ballpark ideas for 2027, 28, 29, and going forward, that would be very helpful.
Yes, sir. And I think Sam and I just had a chance to talk this afternoon. It's one of those things where we're pulling it into a usable format, but it's there. And I believe we have 5 and 10-year projections available. So we'll get those out.
If I could, thank you, Madam Chair. A couple more questions. Let's talk about distributions. I was talking about the funds. When can school districts expect to get these dollars? I know there's a monthly, over 10 months, there's a monthly allocation. Are we looking at monthly, quarterly? How are we looking at the actual distribution of these funds to local governments?
So there would be no change to how we distribute now. So it would be consistent with how it has always been.
Okay. Thank you. One last question. As we're talking about the charter school funds, there's a 4% weight for charter school students. Tell me what that is going to be used for. Is this going to replace the charter school facilities fund? And if so, why is there a $16 million ask in that? If you could address that, ma'am.
Yes, sir. So there is currently the Charter School Facilities Fund that is recurring funding and one-time funding that has been in place for a number of years now. This is in the spirit of what we wanted to do is bring as much as possible outside of the formula into the formula. So you will see that Charter Schools Facility Fund that is already in place with recurring dollars into the formula. To your point, there is a difference between the governor's proposed budget and what you are seeing in the formula. Candidly, the formula amount generates a lower amount than what's in the governor's proposed budget because it is based on formula dollars as opposed to a recurring set amount. So that is in the formula, I think it generates $12.5 to $13 million. So that is the difference that you are seeing with it being outside of the formula versus inside.
Chairman Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know currently in the BEP, there's a cost differential factor which provides certain counties with higher than average wages in the private sector with additional BEP funding for salaries and retirement contributions. Currently, I believe there are 6 different counties who receive this funding: Davidson, Anderson, Knox, Shelby, Roane, and Williamson. Will the TISA eliminate this cost differential factor calculation?
Currently, we do not have the cost differential factor in the TISA.
Is it accounted for some other way?
It is not. We have the salary equity funds, but we do not have cost differential. We are certainly happy to include that if that's feedback or a change that the General Assembly would like to make.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Representative Gillespie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, thank you so much for being here. Y'all have really put a lot of work into this, and I know we all are appreciative of that. Just curious, under the TISA, there'll be 10 different weight allocations for different unique learning needs. And the current amended language states that y'all are going to basically define what those are. First, can you walk us through what those 10 unique weights are?
Absolutely. And so I also want to make sure, and we are happy to send this link on the website, which outlines the unique learning needs crosswalk. Currently in the BEP, if you go to the Blue Book or you go to the computation guide, one of those two, you will see that there are 10 special education option codes. And so what we wanted to do is to make sure there was a clear crosswalk. So if you look at unique learning needs, there are 10 of them. For those, you have unique learning need 1, which is the same as SPED option code 1. You have unique learning needs 2, which includes SPED option code 2. It also includes characteristics of dyslexia and tier 1 for English learners, and so on and so forth. So essentially, those 10 option codes that you see in the BEP are all included in the unique learning needs crosswalk. The crosswalk will actually help districts see what students were eligible for and what that would look like under TISA.
Representative Gillespie, you have a follow-up?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm just curious, we as the legislature, if we wanted to create or take away, substitute one of those weights, is that something that you have discussed with anyone in the legislature or your department? I'm just curious about, the unique learning needs, whether it be dyslexia or something more severe, such as autistic tendencies or something like that. Can you elaborate on that or
Yeah.
just?
Sure. So we have not had any feedback or discussion about removing any of the unique learning needs, those 10 option codes that are currently in place with the proposed bill. I think the qualifications are you are a child with a disability as identified by your IEP or the plan. That includes gifted in the state of Tennessee. So just want to make sure I explicitly say that. English learners, and then it also includes characteristics of dyslexia. Characteristics of dyslexia is something new based on the feedback that we heard in terms of especially looking at early literacy. So that is something that is not currently in the BEP that we have added in terms of those ULNs or unique learning needs within the TISA. So that is something that would be new and added.
Representative Gillespie.
I'm sorry, just one more. So that the dyslexia, that was something that the department did, or how did that? What was the process of adding that new weight?
Sure. So that was the probably the most significant feedback we heard from the subcommittee related to students with disabilities and gifted students. I would say their top 3 pieces of feedback, 1 or 2 of that was characteristics of dyslexia. There are currently requirements in the law for students who exhibit characteristics of dyslexia. There is not existing funding unless that child qualifies for a special education service or has an IEP. So this would essentially provide funding to meet the requirements that are outlined within that law.
Representative Sexton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Commissioner. You and your staff, appreciate you being here. Currently, under the BPP review committee, they're required to review the components and prepare an annual report detailing the recommendations or any revision to the formula. Is that still going to be in place?
So what we have now is that every district would go through a process where they would be able to submit their recommendations. So it wouldn't be a representative group. It would be every district and the stakeholders, families, parents, community members within that district able to provide that feedback, and every district would then be included.
So you wouldn't have an actual report, or you would?
There would be a report. So the report would consist of each district's feedback at the local level. That would be put together for one singular report that would be provided to the General Assembly.
So you're not removing this function at all, or this reporting?
Well, the report would exist. The way that the report would be produced would be different. So instead of having a representative group produce the report, we are giving every district the opportunity to provide what they need for their own district and have that community process at the local level. Each of those districts would then be put together in a report. So it wouldn't be a centralized function and kind of based out of a state agency. It would be based at the local level. Each local report would then be given to you.
Okay, I'm not totally sure I completely understand, but just a little bit, and then I'm through.
Sure.
How is it different? Give me try to make me understand. I was
Yeah.
born in the South.
No, of course, sir. So, so right now, the State Board of Education brings together a group of stakeholders. That includes some elected officials, the Department of Education sits on it, some superintendents, and some district staff. It is a representative group of folks from across the state. Annually, they get together approximately 4 times per year and look at what it's a review committee. So they provide recommendations to the General Assembly on what they think should happen with the BEP. That is a report that is produced annually. The shift is instead of having that representative group come together, make decisions, and then send that report to you, is to have every district be able to say what makes the most sense for them locally. So that same process that happens centrally with the state board would now happen in every district. So I, as a district, maybe I'm small and rural, I might have a set of things that really make a lot of sense that are important to me. That might be very different than a very large urban district and what makes sense to them. One of the things that we heard as feedback through this process is that parents and community members and organizations really appreciated having more of a voice in things like school funding. And one of the things was, how do we continue to have a voice? This was a way to reflect and honor that significant feedback that we received to ensure local communities continue to have a voice in the direction of school funding moving forward.
So better designed for each district rather than just lumping everybody together. Is
That's,
that right?
yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
That was better. That was a better way to say it, sir.
Thank you.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. And
Yes, sir.
by the way, if I'd known you wasn't going to eat that ice cream, I would have.
Well, it's just staring back at me, but it feels rude to eat it anyway.
My question is from a constituent. It's about the grants that are given to chartered schools for facilities outside of the BEP, and how if it says, actually, the question is if you can get a list of those chartered schools and how much of the grants they receive or will receive.
Yes, sir. So I'm going to defer. Dr. Eve Carney is here and she oversees that and will be able to give you that information.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Eve Carney, Chief of Districts and Schools. One of the things that the Charter School Facilities Grant does is it is designed to do a couple of different things. It is intended to be awarded on a per pupil basis partially and partially on high-performing charter schools who have a needs base to them. And so currently, I'm trying to pull I had the spreadsheet open in my laptop that I just closed. But we basically track across the state, the 116 charter schools that we currently have across the state each receive an allocation based kind of partially on enrollment and partially on need. And that is the way in which that is distributed currently. And I can provide you the comprehensive list of those if that would be helpful.
Madam Chair, could you have it sent to your office? If
We'll do
you
that.
could send it to Madam Chair's office, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, and thank you.
Chairman Wendell, this will be our final question, and then we'll move to the expansion hearing.
Thank you. When I look at the new formula, I understand most of the, or I think I understand most of the categories. But let's take Jackson County, for example. You're familiar with Jackson County. You've been very good to us, and we appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
And we appreciate your visits to Jackson County. But when I look down the formula, I see poverty, economic disadvantage, sparsity, unique needs of the student. And I also see charter. And until I get to that component of the formula, I think I'm tracking it.
Yep.
What does that mean for a county school system, such as Jackson County, Clay County, Pickett County, Overton County, that currently doesn't have a charter school? And specifically, does the new formula allow for students that live in Jackson County to go to a new charter school in Putnam County and the money follow the student to Putnam County?
So I'll answer all, I think there were 3 questions embedded
Sure.
there. So question number 1 is students who attend a public charter school would generate that weight. So that is, if they are not in a public charter school, they would not generate the weight, just like if they are not economically disadvantaged, they would not generate that weight. The second is any student right now who moves from a traditional public school to a public charter school, the money's still included in funding for the charter school. So that doesn't change. What does change under TISA is that we can have a very specific amount of dollars that would go across from a public school to a public charter school. But no matter what, if I am a student right now in Jackson County and I am in a traditional public school and I go to a new charter school in Putnam County, under the BEP, Putnam County would get credit for that student. That Putnam County charter school would still get dollars allocated to that student. It would just be in ratios and averages and really hard for me to answer exactly how many
No,
dollars
sure,
went
I
over.
understand that.
Yeah, so that would be the difference.
So let me make sure I distill this. There's one community in Jackson County, Dodson's Branch, where it's closer to Cookeville than Gainesboro.
Sure.
And there's only one high school in Jackson County, which is in Gainesboro, which you're familiar with because you've been there, thankfully. If all the students or most of the students in Dodson's Branch, which is sort of a suburb of Putnam County, of Cookeville, if they all decide to go to charter school in Cookeville, 5 years from now, does the money follow them to Cookeville?
It would under any formula. So
So,
yes, it would under any formula. Wherever the student attends, that's the district that would generate that funding.
right. So if a new charter school incorporated or LLC or whatever the business model is or non-business model, if it's a public charter school, the money is going to follow the child. And it might be a good thing. I'm not here to be critical about it. It may be the best thing ever. I don't know. But the bottom line is the money will follow the child outside of that county to a new charter school, just like it does now.
if there's a charter school established.
That's correct.
So, thank you.
Yes, yes, sir. I also just want to, point of privilege, I just want to say the high school, they made me a beautiful steel outline of the state of Tennessee, and it's still hanging in my house. So I just want to say a public
We
thank you. They're
appreciate the
wonderful.
fact you've taken your
Yeah.
time to be in Judge County multiple times,
Yeah,
and I
they're lovely.
appreciate your efforts.
Yeah, they're lovely. Thank you.
Thank, thank you, Commissioner. As you can see, there's a lot of interest, obviously, and education is a huge part of the way we spend our money. And as the Finance
ma'am.
Committee, we try to take a deep interest in where those dollars go and how they are spent. So we appreciate that. We may have additional questions that we would forward to you. But now we're way behind schedule, and I do apologize for those behind you on that. But we have an expansion request that we need to hear about from you, if you would.
Even Jean. Okay, great. And then Jean. Okay, yeah. Great, wonderful. Thank you, Chair Lady. I am going to turn this over to Eve and Jean to talk a little bit about ESSER in particular. Eanes, I'm sorry, Eanes. Well, Eanes is part of ESSER. Yep.
So good afternoon. Again, Eve Carney, Chief of Districts and Schools. One of the programs that is in the relief funding that came through the American Rescue Plan is the Emergency Assistance to Non-Public Schools, otherwise known as EANS. And that is a program that, as we know, students across our state and across the nation, regardless of where they attend school, have been impacted by the pandemic. These funds are specifically earmarked to support students in non-public schools who have been most impacted by the pandemic. And so part of this budget expansion is intended to allow us to award the second round of EANS funding to participating and eligible non-public schools. Unlike the first set of dollars that came through for this same purpose, the U.S. Department of Education increased the criteria for this, really intending, that the school has to be a nonprofit school. It has to be appropriately accredited within our state. It also could not have participated in the Paycheck Protection Program, but this time it also was intended to focus on schools and communities most impacted by the pandemic, or non-public schools that serve a higher number of low-income students. And so that is the need for the expansion, is to be able to award those federal dollars to participating schools through an application process that's currently underway.
Thank you for that explanation. Leader Gant? You're recognized. I believe you have I believe you were indicating to me that you had a question.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And earlier, I had some questions surrounding the schools that are in the flood zones, but Representative Garrett literally stole my questions that I had. So, but at least they were answered. So that's a good thing. All right, the question that I've got is around emergency assistance for public non-public schools. The department is receiving $73.6 million in federal funding to award grants to eligible non-public school to address the impact that COVID-19 has had on their students and teachers. This funding is a part of the governor's emergency relief fund, known as GEAR. The expansion request documentation indicates non-public schools will apply at the local level, and unobligated funding will transfer back to the GEAR fund. Please provide any information on how these funds can be utilized, the number of eligible non-public schools there are, and the criteria the department will use in determining which non-public schools will receive that funding.
So I'm happy to respond to those questions. As I noted, this is the second round of GEAR funding, of EANS funding that the U.S. Department of Education has released. The first round has already been awarded, and it was based on the criteria that was put forth by the U.S. Department of Education. There weren't, the more stringent requirements came with this second round of funding. So we used the criteria that really was around us putting out information to all non-public schools to determine who might be interested and eligible. They were spending the funds on exactly what we saw in our public schools, preparing, responding, trying to prevent the pandemic. Cleaning supplies, social distancing, supports for students learning remotely, et cetera. Similarly, that is part of what we are seeing. A little bit less of some of those first time. The needs have obviously changed where we were a year and a half ago to where we are today. And so very much the non-public school can continue to use the funds in the way they have previously, but they can also use them for the same types of expenditures that we're seeing in our public schools. That might mean additional learning time for students, stipends for teachers or faculty members doing additional responsibilities, et cetera.
Thank you. How will the unobligated funds that are reverting back be used or utilized?
So any of the funds that are under, when we accepted these dollars, we were to award those within a 6-month period and return any funds that were not appropriately obligated to non-public schools back to the governor to determine the need. And so with some of the tighter timelines on obligating these funds, we continue to support the things and the priorities that we are seeing across our state in the needs that the commissioner has discussed earlier, whether that's continued support for students to mitigate learning loss and recovery of missed instruction time, as well as strengthening programs to bring more teachers into the profession, and just ensuring that we have good school options so that all of our students are career and college ready when they leave us. And so for those, it would be similar purposes for any funds that would be returning to the governor.
Leader Gant.
Thank you, Chairman. How will the department ensure that the non-public schools are utilizing the funding appropriately?
That also falls in my shop. When you do a lot of federal programs and oversight, you do a lot of the oversight part for certain. That's one of the things we've been strengthening in a couple of different ways. Number one, working within our existing structures when we oversee other federal dollars, building in those types of components into our existing practices. In addition, we're looking at reimbursement requests that we get from non-public schools and tracking them to ensure that they are being used for allowable purposes. That's a similar thing that we do with public schools as well, but really just trying to ensure that the funds are being implemented with fidelity and to the intent of the program.
Leader Gant.
Is there any reporting requirements on the recipients?
Yes, sir. One of the things that we will have and that we're actually coming upon here in the next several months, beginning in May, we have annual reporting for all of our federal dollars for public and for non-public. They are subject to the same reporting requirements, and we are collecting information, and it's quite extensive, and I'm sure something we will be sharing with this body as we get that first annual report coming late May and through the end of the state fiscal year, June 30.
Thank you, and thank you, Chairman. That's all I have.
Chairman Zachary, take us home.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To finish us up strong, Commissioner and team, just quick questions related to the $10.2 million one-time grant for school-based mental health support. How will the department select which public school districts receive that? Is that grants, one-time awards? Can you walk us through that, please?
I'm happy to. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Luna. This is work that's in her shop, and I know they've been doing a lot of work on lots of things, but this in particular.
Thank you, Commissioner. So what our plans are with that is you may have heard of our trauma-informed schools work, and that has really been outstanding the last couple of years, if I do say so myself. We have a team that has really worked with schools that have been very responsive, and that has more than doubled to the point where we cannot reach that capacity. So we are shifting to a district-wide approach. So instead of just individual trauma-informed schools, it will be a district-wide approach where it will be called resilient school communities. The whole idea is to really build up the resilience in our students and in our teachers. And as part of that, it will be a non-competitive grant that schools may apply for, and we will distribute those funds to all of those who apply through that intent.
Chairman Zachary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When will those be dispersed, and then what is the tracking mechanism?
Absolutely. So we are actually in the process of developing that right now. There are some initial drafts with the commissioner for review, and we anticipate having that out yet this spring.
Last one, Madam Chair. This is it. Final one.
You're right, it is.
Thank you. Thank you. So since this is a one-time grant, how do we address recurring costs? If this is utilized for recurring costs, what's the plan for that moving forward?
Absolutely. So this model is actually a train the trainer model. And so we would be working with districts to actually teach them the professional development at that district level that then they can incorporate and spread to their administrators, to their teachers. And the idea for sustainability is that they would actually be able to have trainers themselves at the district level.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner, and your team. Again, we appreciate the time that you took today. And obviously, everything is very busy right now. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank you and your department. It's been an incredibly challenging couple of years dealing with pandemic and all of the other things that have been associated with that. I think you've done yeoman's work as you and your team. And then adding on to that, developing a new funding formula is just another little side project while you continue to deal with the pandemic. So you all have done amazing work, and we appreciate that. Thank you for being here today, and we will move on to our next budget hearing. Thank you,
ma'am.
We will ask Dr. Hayburn with the State Board of Education and her team to come forward. Dr. Hammond, we appreciate your patience and apologize for the delay, but as you can see, there's a lot of interest and a lot of to discuss when we look at funding education in Tennessee. But again, we're just going to ask you to get right into your budget overview. We'll have any questions, and we'll try and sort of get back on schedule. Thank
Great.
you.
I think, let me just make sure, is my microphone on? I think it is. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Sarah Hayburn Morrison, the Executive Director at the State Board of Education. We work closely with the Department of Education as the policy and rulemaking body for K-12 education in Tennessee. And just want to start by thanking this committee for your ongoing support of our work, of the department's work. As Madam Chair said, to me, there's not much more important business than education in a state like Tennessee, and we aspire to do it as well as possible. So we will quickly give you introductions, talk about our budget update, which is sort of a non-issue this year, and just a few quick updates on major work streams. So quick introductions of my team.
Nathan James, I'm the Deputy Executive Director for External Affairs and Legislative Affairs.
Amy Owen, Deputy Executive Director for Policy and Research.
Good afternoon, Angie Sanders, General Counsel for the board.
With that, I'll ask Nathan, who wears many hats, one of which is our Chief Financial Officer of sorts, to give you the overview of our budget this year, which, like I said, is rather non-consequential. But Nathan, you can run through that, please.
Thank you. Yes, our only cost increase that was requested was a $99,200 for additional rent. That is actually was programmed in there by finance and administration because they're moving us within the same building that we're in. And so since we're moving it at their request, the amount was built into the budget to cover the move and the cost difference. And that is the total of our cost increases. So if you're looking at your green sheets, you'll see that the overall budget has not increased very much. And of course, with the transfer to the Charter Commission, all of that LEA money went in that direction, and they'll be next up beyond us. So.
Great. And with that, we'll keep moving. You'll hear more about our charter role and how that's evolved in just a moment, and again from the Charter Commission as well. But with permission, just very brief updates on a few key programmatic work streams that the board oversees. First, in terms of setting instructional standards for students, this is one of our big responsibilities, and it serves as the foundation for so much of what happens in K-12 education. As we hear in the committee discussions that you have, certainly plays out in the media as well. But our standards, in terms of what students need to know and be able to do in any given subject or grade, serve as the foundation for both instruction, for textbook decisions, for teacher training in terms of our educator prep programs. And so ensuring that we have a robust process where educators, the public, legislators like yourselves are involved in terms of helping us make those decisions about what should be in the standards for math, English, language arts, social studies, and science, among other academic areas, is one of the most important decisions we make. We are coming to the end of a couple key dates there, or key work streams there related to the standards review process. It happens every 6 years for each of the 4 core academic areas. And we are just coming towards the conclusion of the science review period. So we look forward to convening the Standards Recommendation Committee soon, which is a jointly appointed committee of educators and other members of the public who make the final recommendation to the state board about what should be in those standards. We just closed the second public survey on these standards, again, in an effort to have input from all over the state, from all parties who would like to weigh in on these standards. And we've also recently taken action on some related math courses in response to higher ed and changes in industry, making sure that those, especially the high school math courses, are in line with industry standards and expectations for what our students need to know and be able to do in math coming out of high school. Another major area, just to touch on briefly in terms of the state board's work, is educator preparation. We make decisions about the approval of anyone who wants to train teachers for licensure in Tennessee, whether that's a Teach for America or a Tennessee Tech. We do ongoing accountability for all of those ed prep programs. So we issue an annual report card that comes out in February each year. That's something that you've supported us with in the past. It's in legislation, that requirement. And that's to ensure that we have robust accountability for the outcomes of those graduates, and that we can look across the state and understand, which institutions, which programs are really doing an excellent job preparing our teachers for this extremely challenging work in the classrooms across our state. So we look at how those educators perform in the classroom in terms of their outcome data. We look at their placement, their retention, several other things related to the data that we're able to collect around our completers once they finish their educator prep programs. We've also taken steps to expand those options and try to be more innovative in the way that we think about the pipeline. So for example, our districts now can apply to become educator prep programs, and several of them have done that in specific areas. That was as a result of PC 571, which was passed last session. We've also passed policy that allows the department to do something similar when it comes to endorsements. So a teacher who already has a license can add an additional endorsement if they say they're licensed in science and they want to also take on an endorsement in math. That's something that the department can set up now and provide free of charge, which we think will be helpful for teachers as they try to expand the areas in which they're certified to teach. I'm just going to move through this really quickly. Feel free to stop me, obviously, if you have questions, or we'll take questions at the end. But I do want to also touch on another major area of our responsibility, which is educator licensure discipline. You heard Angie Sanders, our general counsel, who's here and can speak to that further if needed. But this is another major area in which we set rules and policies related to educator misconduct. So making sure that that's clear in our rules and policies, and then we have the capacity to take those actions as necessary in terms of something that would rise to the level of a state licensure action. This is different than a personnel action, and we try to make that distinction in our training with superintendents and other educators so that they understand the difference. But certainly there are some misconduct instances that do warrant a state licensure action. And so we have a team now of 3 attorneys and 2 paralegals, thanks to a budget expansion last year that allowed our team to make additional hires and expand our capacity to do that work as efficiently and as effectively as possible. We, for example, had 536 reports in 2021. We currently have 172 cases open at the moment. So it's a constant and sort of steady workload in terms of those educator misconduct cases that come into the board. 2 other quick points to hit, and then we will stop and see if there are any questions. Nathan, if you could talk briefly, the ERIC Education Recovery Innovation Commission.
Yes. So you all might remember that in 2020, the Tennessee General Assembly formed the Education Recovery and Innovation Commission through Public Chapter 792. This commission was formed to examine the short and long-term effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on education in Tennessee. And members of the commission will form recommendations for the General Assembly, the State Board, the Department of Education, Higher Education Commission on the strategies to close educational gaps arising from school closures and to modernize the state's educational structure to create more flexibility in the delivery of education to students. That commission was created with no cost and no expense to it, and administratively attached to the State Board of Education. We've taken great pains to make sure it has remained independent as well. So this year you have several bills that you've seen in front of the General Assembly, which were generated by recommendations made through the Education Recovery Innovation Commission. You've got Senate Bill 2664. The House bill was carried by Representative Littleton to provide reports on progress on the Literacy Success Act. You've got about allowing students to test out of courses at the high school level. You've got a bill on periodic remote learning drills, also to make certain that educator preparation providers are training teachers how to teach in a lot of different environments, both in person, remotely, and also legislation that would remove the financial disincentive for early graduation for high schools.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. And the last thing I wanted to share with the committee was around our changing role with respect to charter schools. And so, as we mentioned previously, our budget reflects that change in that we're not serving as a local education agency of record for the charter schools that the state board had approved when we were serving as an authorizer. Now, instead of serving as an authorizer ourselves, we are, per the same legislation that brought the commission into being, are serving in the role of charter authorizer evaluation. We conduct the evaluations of authorizers. So that means on a biannual basis, anyone in Tennessee, whether you're a district or the Charter Commission or the Achievement School District who has the ability to authorize charter schools, will be reviewed and evaluated by the state board in a rigorous and sort of public way in terms of ensuring that these authorizers are both adhering to the high standards that we have for authorizers in our state, and that we're also able to learn across authorizers in terms of best practices and how we ensure that schools are open that are serving students well, and when they are not, that they are appropriately closed. And so this is a new role for the state board. We're only the fourth state to take this on, and I think it will provide additional transparency and accountability for our charter authorizing work across the state. We've just completed the first cycle of authorizer evaluations after a year of work to pilot that rubric and the process. So we have a member of our team who's responsible for that work, and she also contracts out with additional other experts nationally to help with that authorizer evaluation piece. But that is a change in the state board's work from serving as an authorizer to now serving as the body that does the evaluation of all authorizers across our state. So with that, I will stop and see if there's any questions about any of the programmatic updates, or certainly, like I said, our sort of non-consequential budget this year.
Thank you, Director Morrison. And we do have questions. Chairman Hicks, you're first on my list.
Thank you, Chair Lady and Director. Thank you for being here, you and your team. One component that your department, your agency handles is that of teacher licensure. And so just curious, coming out of the pandemic, and we know it's been a interesting year. I can tell you with my school district last year, I think, and we're a small school district, and we still saw more folks with a lot of tenure just retire at the end of the year. Have you saw that across the state? I guess that's one of my questions that I've got to ask. And how has that affected licensure, I guess, within the state board?
So with respect to retention of teachers, not
Yes.
the educator misconduct.
Yes.
So I'll defer to my colleagues to see if they have sort of specific numbers to share with you or specific places to point you. I mean, I think we all have sensed that teachers are carrying a lot of a huge load right now, and so would expect to see some turnover. I don't think that's borne out in the numbers quite yet, but again, it's something that we're monitoring with our partners at the department who oversee that data system.
Mm-hmm.
But Amy, our Director of Policy and Research, may be able to speak more specifically.
Thank you, Sarah. Amy Owen. With
If you
the
would,
State
for the
Board.
record, just identify yourself and your title, please.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Amy Owen, Deputy Executive Director for Policy and Research with the board. Two parts to your question. In terms of people who are obtaining initial teacher licensure, we recently put out our annual Ed Prep report card update. And we do see that in comparison to about 5 years ago, there's nearly 700 fewer candidates earning initial licensure in Tennessee. However, there is a slight uptick in their retention in a Tennessee public school or public charter school for a second year, and it drops off a little bit in looking at the third year. So that's what's going on with early career teachers. In terms of longer tenured teachers, like you mentioned, the Department of Education collects annual vacancy data from each school district, and then we'll share it back out with the state board later this spring. So I don't have current numbers available for you, but the department may be able to provide it or provide a copy of that same information they'll give to the board.
Okay, thank you. If you could just get that to the chair lady's office, she
Sure.
can get that out to everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you
sir.
very much.
Thank you, Chairman Baum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the most important bills that we're going to be debating this session is the bill to revise the funding formula for education, the TISA proposal. What oversight of that funding formula will the state board have?
Thank you for that question, Representative. We are still working through the details of that with the administration. Currently, as Commissioner Schwinn mentioned, the state board oversees the BEP review committee, so we have some oversight in that respect with the current formula. There's not a sort of exact parallel to that review committee with the new formula, the TISA. So I think, our involvement will be through some of the policies and rules that are related to some of those categories. We were just looking at that prior to this hearing in terms of, some of the special ed designations. Those are in our rule. EL designations are in our rules. And so we'll have some input in that respect in terms of some of the aspects of that TISA. But to answer your question, there's not a direct role for us in terms of oversight under the TISA.
Do you
that I
feel
pointed.
like that means under TISA, your role would be diminished relative to what it's been under the BEP?
It's just a change. The formula that we've had has been really more sort of dollars and cents based on head counts. This new student-based formula has a lot more moving parts. And so again, we'll be involved, but it'll be a little bit more under the radar in terms of some of the policies that inform the metrics and outcomes in the new formula. So I think it's really just a change.
Okay, thank you.
And I apologize, I had to step out, so if you answered my question already, forgive me, but you guys are required to produce an annual report about education preparation providers. That's something I have a real passion about because I think the most important aspect of education is quality of the teacher in the classroom. We can do lots of other things to improve education, but if we don't have a good teacher in the classroom, we're spinning our wheels, in my opinion. So can you give us an update on the status of our state's education preparation providers? I know one that I'm intimately familiar with in my area, they're working at it and improvements are being made, but they're still, not where we would want them to be. So can you just let us know how, if improvement is being made? And I guess my question has been to them and will be to others. We have schools or education preparation providers in the state that are doing a good job. So I'm not quite certain why we can't replicate that model in other locations, but obviously it's not as easy as I think it should be. So could you just speak to that, please?
No, thank you for the question, Madam Chair. And I would wholeheartedly agree in terms of the importance of the educator in the classroom, and the research certainly bears that out. It's the most important in-school factor in student achievement. And so I think we have to, as a state and state agencies, focus on the quality and the training of the people who are going into our classrooms. And we know it's an extremely challenging job. We did talk briefly in response to another question about the educator prep report card that we put out annually per legislation. It comes out in February, so the latest version just came out. My colleague Amy Owen was just speaking to it, I think, as you were coming back in. And there's a number of things that you can see in that report. I'd encourage you to, when you have a moment, look at it. It's as user-friendly as we know how to make it, but it looks at the graduates from our programs across the state and shows you how many of them are being placed in jobs in Tennessee public school classrooms, how are they doing when they're in those classrooms based on the evaluation metrics that we're able to collect at the state level around observation and growth data. Also shows how many of them are being retained in various programs across the state. And typically in sort of non-COVID years when we were lacking some of the data, we do a sort of overall score of each of those prep programs. And to your point, that helps us kind of scan the state to say who are our high performers, how can we understand and replicate some of the practices that those programs are experiencing. So it is, I think, a helpful tool both for program improvement and for accountability. I'll look to Amy Owen to my left to see if she has anything she wants to add further. We were just talking about sort of the number of teachers has gone down who are going into teaching, but the retention of those teachers is up. So there's a number of ways that we can look at sort of how's a program being assessed and whether it's successful or not. But I think one is, are the teachers in demand? Are they getting hired? Is, there a strong partnership with the LEA or LEAs that they serve in terms of that relationship? Amy, other details you'd like to add?
Sure. Amy Owen, State Board of Education. We did release this report on February 15th. It's a consumer report style website with a dashboard of all 40 odd ed prep providers in Tennessee. And in typical years, we would have each provider with an overall score of meets expectations, does not meet expectations, or exceeds expectations. We don't have those overall scores this year. We didn't last year either due to COVID-related data challenges. But within some of the metrics, we do have those evaluative measures of meets, does not meet, or exceeds expectations on metrics like second-year retention, third-year retention, and candidates earning high-demand endorsement areas. We present the data on observation and growth scores in comparison to the state average for each ed prep, but we have not scored it so far. We do have an advisory council we work with, and we'll determine when it's appropriate to resume the scores. What we've seen in the last 5 years or so of producing the report card is that we've seen upticks in a few key metrics. One of those is the percentage of candidates earning high demand endorsement areas, which are special ed, English as a second language, upper grades, math, science, and world language. So that really speaks to how our ed preps are trying to respond to these areas of need in districts. A number of them created dual certification programs. So if you're getting your elementary license, you might also get ESL or special education. So they're really responding to this as a policy lever, but also even more importantly, to respond to the districts that they partner with and to make sure they're serving their needs. So we look forward to continuing to add data to the report card and being able to share some more specific evaluative measures in future years. But if you ever have any questions about that report or additional things you'd want to see on it, feel free to reach out to our staff for sure.
Thank you for that. And I guess, all of those things that you just mentioned are important, but I'm not sure they get to the quality of the teacher in the classroom, and that may just be simply because of the lack of data with all the the testing that didn't happen and all the things that did not happen due to COVID. But be real interested when those data points become available again and having some sort of metric to really looking at if the teachers in education prep school A are better prepared and providing better education in the classroom than B, and then how B might learn from A or vice versa. So,
and we'd be happy to come sit down and walk through even the historical, 3 years ago, we could look at, sort of the trends in terms of who are the high performers, because there definitely are some outstanding programs that we look to, UT Knoxville being one. I mean, some of our flagship institutions, and then some of our smaller sort of non-traditional pathway programs also look really good on the report when you look back a couple of years when we had those overall scores.
all right. Well, thank you. We have kept you long enough. Thank you again for patiently waiting while we finished up with Commissioner Swin and her team before you. And that's what I thought I was doing, Representative Miller. I ask your pardon for some of my colleagues on the committee who are, just getting a little, I can't even think of the word.
It's late in the day.
Shell-shocked, I
Yep.
don't know. But thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience with us.
Thank you for having us, Madam Chair and Committee.
We're going to ask the Charter School Commission to come forward. Don't be intimidated by the fact that you're between us and leaving, and we have a number of committee members who have one foot on the banana peel and the other foot out the door. Folks, Thank you so much for being here and for you patiently waiting. It's nothing is more fun than being last on the agenda on a late afternoon. But we have Ms. Stovall here as the executive director for the commission and a longtime good friend of mine who has been a supporter of mine for a long time, which makes him a very intelligent man. Tom Griscom, who is the chair of the Charter Commission. So welcome, Tom, and the other members of your team. And we will ask you to just get right into your presentation.
Great. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Tom Griscom. I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I do serve as the first chair of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. With me today is Tess Stovall to my right, who's our executive director, Chase Engel, who is our director of external affairs, and Melanie Harrell, who is our director of finance. Since this is our first time in front of the committee, I thought I'd spend just a couple minutes to talk about what we're doing and give you a little background. There are 9 commissioners appointed by the governor and confirmed by the General Assembly. In 2021, the commission took over the responsibilities you heard from the State Board of Education to hear charter school appeals. Charter school applications first go to local school boards. If a school board decides not to approve the request, a decision can be made to appeal to the Charter Commission, and then we will take that appeal and decide whether to confirm the decision of the school board or to approve the charter. The commission has had 3 appeals so far. We've approved 2, and we have confirmed 1 that was denied by a local school system. In July of 2021, we assumed the responsibility as a charter school authorizer, also from the State Board of Education. And that means we have an oversight and a responsibility to monitor the performance of certain schools that are attached to the commission. And last year, the General Assembly gave us the passed legislation to create new pathways for high-performing charter schools coming out of the Achievement School District. And there was provided an opportunity if those schools chose to come to us directly rather than going to their school system, which in this case was Shelby County. On January 28, we approved 3 applicants that came out of Shelby County. And the Department of Education looks at these schools and puts them on an exit list that comes to us. We then will have these schools until their agreement for being a charter is completed. So with that quick overview, let me turn to Tess Stovall, our Executive Director.
Thank you. Again, Tess Stovall, Executive Director. I'd like to go over our budget for fiscal year 23. Our primary ask in the budget is related to a rent increase similar to the State Board of Education. The Department of General Services has asked the agency to move to a different floor on the Davy Crockett Tower, which is a slightly larger space and results in an increase of our rent in approximately $26,500. You will see a note here around the Charter Schools Facility Fund of $32 million. This was an error when the budget was created. It is actually a Department of Education program and is typically run by the Department of Education. We have been in conversations with the Finance and Administration and the department, and we do intend to see this to move out of our budget when the governor's amended budget comes out to move back under the Department of Education. Looking forward, I wanted to review what schools will be under the portfolio of the commission. We are growing substantially in the next school year. Currently, the commission has 4 charter schools under its authorization. 3 of those are located here in Nashville, and 1 of those are in Memphis. We have 6 schools that are slated to be under the commission beginning in school year 22-23. 3 of those are coming to us from the Achievement School District that our chair has mentioned. And then the rest of those have been our new start charter schools that have been approved upon appeal. 2 of those schools were approved by the State Board of Education prior to the responsibility shifting to the commission. And then the final school is one that was recently approved by the commission. And with that, we are happy to take any questions from the committee.
Thank you for your succinct presentation at this time of day. We appreciate that more than you know. Representative Lynn, I believe you have a question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I have a question. The Charter School Commission budgeted $642,000 in revenue for 21-22. Can you, and it's from the charter authorizer fee, and you're saying you have three schools there. Can you break down for us how that $642,000 fee is, what it consists of?
Sure, Tess Stovall. So statutorily, the commission is allowed to collect up to 3% of an authorized charter school's BEP to pay for our administrative costs. So right now, we have 4 schools currently in authorization. So we do collect that revenue of a 3%. So as the BEP payments are distributed to our schools on a monthly basis, we are holding back that 3%. Typically, and what we have budgeted that money for are, number one, staffing. We are, as the authorizer, we serve as the school district for any school that is under us. So we have an entire team of individuals who handle federal funds, special populations monitoring, student information systems, et cetera. So number one, staffing. Number two, systems. So we have our own student information system. We have our own system that houses individualized learning plans for English learners. We travel, we do annual site visits, et cetera. So really making sure that any of those funds are used for our quote unquote authorizer duty. I will say that any unused funds in the authorizer fee get refunded back to the school at the end of the school year. So we are very making sure that we keep account of what funds are used, and anything that's not used is then refunded back to our schools.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair?
Representative Lynn?
Thank you. How much revenue does the commission anticipate to collect in authorizer fees in future years? You know, the governor is making some changes. What are you all anticipating?
Sure, Tess Stovall. I will turn actually to our Director of Finance and Operations, Melanie Harrell, to give you a projection of if enrollment holds to what we think it will be, what we project our BEP and our authorizer fee revenue to be. I will say it's a highly variable number, right? Anytime enrollment changes, if there's legislation that passes around changes in how schools and districts are funded, obviously our authorizer fee revenue will change. We have some preliminary projections based on what we know about funding for next school year around what that authorizer fee will be. But certainly that is something we watch very closely because it is such a variable revenue figure for us.
Thank you so much. This is Melanie Harrell, the Director of Finance and Operations for the Commission. I can get you an exact number after this. I will say that we do know that we are growing by about 2.5 times our current number of schools that will be authorized. So we're growing from about 1,700 students currently to an anticipated about 4,500. So you can imagine that we are, anticipating a proportional increase in our authorizer fee funding. So we can certainly follow up and get you an exact number in your office, an exact number after this hearing. But we would anticipate that to scale pretty proportionally. Again, as Tess mentioned, knowing that local tax revenue may be variable, enrollment may be variable, things may be changed over time.
Representative Lynn?
When I think about that, the authorizer fee, you're basically acting as the school district for the school. So 3%, running a school district on 3% is pretty lean. And then you said that you even refund some money. So is the sum sufficient to meet your costs and your anticipated growth?
Thank you, Tess Stovall. So currently we do have recurring state dollars that are supplementing what is not covered by the authorizer fee. That was put in place by the General Assembly when the Charter Commission was created, knowing that the work of the commission and the required staffing was going to be necessary before we began collecting authorizer fee. As an example, we are working through the pre-opening process on the 6 schools that we anticipate having under our jurisdiction in the next school year, but we are currently not collecting any of the authorizer fee for those revenues because those schools aren't in operation under us right now. We do anticipate looking into future fiscal years and looking into the number of schools that may come under the commission, the need to ask for additional positions for the commission. Right now, we are authorized to hire up to 15 individuals. We have hired 12 of those 15. So we look very closely in making sure that do we have the staffing to meet the needs of the schools? Are we set up for success? Right now, we feel very good about where we sit right now. But as we get further appeals into going into next school year, we may be authorizing additional schools. We do think there may be a need to ask for additional revenue and positions as our work and portfolio grows.
Chairman Whitson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, for this opportunity to ask these questions. Ma'am, the Charter School Commission received 5 additional positions to support the expansion of their responsibilities. Have all these staff positions been hired so far, ma'am?
Thank you. So we have hired 2 of the 5. We are in the process of hiring the 3rd. We are holding on those final 2 positions until we are actually currently working through 2 appeals right now. So really looking to see where are those needs in terms of staff capacity and to hire those individuals in the right places on the team.
Hey, would this be enough folks to handle your additional responsibilities under the ASDs?
Thank you, Tess Stovall. Absolutely. We feel really good about where we sit right now. We had when we asked for those additional positions, we had a sense of where we were in terms of the additional work around the Achievement School District. With the additional positions we've been able to hire over the last 6 months, plus the 2 additional positions that we have on our ramp, we feel like we're able to fulfill our current responsibility. As I responded to another question, I think as we increase in terms of the number of schools under our portfolio, we are going to have to think about, do we have the appropriate staffing and district functions to do all of the work of school districts across the state? That's something that I know that the commission talks a lot about, is making sure we are set up for success and that we do this work really well.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Representative Garrett.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm more have a comment than anything. Thank you for your staff for being here. Probably all but really one of your staff members. I don't know if you know, but Chase Single was my first assistant down here when I came, and my disappointment in his service to my office is because he left for bigger and better things my first year down here, 1 week before the filing deadline when I was first down there. So I'm still upset about it. I don't know if you can tell my frustration up here. When he told me he was going to go on to bigger and better things, I'm going to be honest with you, I just didn't believe him. I just did not believe him. And so, but I am obviously totally kidding. Chase, I'm proud of you. I'm glad where you are. You're doing a great job. And keep up the good work. I'm so glad you actually did go on to bigger and better things. And I know you're not going to stop there. So thank you very much. And thank you, Madam Chair, for that indulgence, and your team. Y'all are doing a great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming. Tom, thank you for making the trip from Chattanooga. We appreciate your presence here today, and we appreciate the work that the commission is doing, and I think even more work that probably is going to come your way in the future. So again, we are very grateful for all of the effort and for the volunteer commission members who do this work for even less pay than state representatives get. So thank you for doing that as a service to your state.
Thank you.
Members, we are back in session, and without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you.